Hello. Well, I'm the awkward person who is talking about a lot of things because I have an experience for about 50, a little bit more than 50, almost 55 years of working with user involvement and people who need extra help of some sort or other. That means that I'm sometimes a little bit confusing because I'm taking examples of people that are just as different and uncomfortable for anyone who isn't there, like the blind, like the people with physical disability, etc. And those in itself are situations where other people are not always comfortable. Well, the 4 traits that indicate social status, those are the things that are different and according to each individual. Gender, class, race, and age. And so we can actually, this is the Goffman long series, and we can actually add to that size and weight, because they're also as obvious as any of the other traits. When you meet somebody first time, you don't need to know a name, you don't need a place, you don't need anything, you can see it immediately. And that means that just being there, and you get all these heavy things on top of you, you didn't know that that was going to happen. Or you get used to it, actually. Weight stigma is a social construction. It's not relevant in itself. It's just something that we in society have decided that this is the way we're going to think. Why this decision was made and how it came about, I don't think very many people knew. But anything that is apart from others is very easy to get a tag on. You need to have special services sometimes, you need to have special help, you need to have a lot of other things, trying to find out what's the reason for and all that. Because people with overweight problems usually need support, physical support, in various different kinds. Also need emotional support. Also need the physical support in terms of having equipment around them that they can use. So the problem then is that it's considered self-induced. And the only one to blame is yourself. Maybe your parents, maybe your family. But that's only things that you're not kind of invited in society. There's always this restriction against you as a person because you don't fit in. Heaven's sake, are you going to fit in a crowd? Ooh, it's going to take more place. You're more likely to, in a day like this and walking like this, you get a little warm, right? But weight stigma, nevertheless, is in our culture all the time. We cannot avoid it. You come into a place, you want to have a piece of furniture, like a bed, and somebody will walk by you and say, "No, it's going to have it for you." Or you come into a restaurant and people are commenting what you're eating. It doesn't matter if it's just a tiny, tiny little bit of a meatball. You're still accused because you're eating too much. The picture that we have the whole time, and it's really weird because nobody understands what the bottom of this is. Before in our culture, we had people who were big size. We had respect. It was respectful to have the dean of the university or the person in charge of the city. Oh, well, I could really walk around. And that was instead a good thing, a good marketing of your power, because you had money to make yourself big. You didn't think of it that way, but you always got, I mean, before in the 1700s, you ate 50 dishes at one particular meeting, dinner. 50
dishes. Half time.
What?
Half time.
Half time. So, wherever we go, whatever we do, when we walk into a room, we already have this thing on our top of our heads. So we have to see, in some way, defend ourselves or whatever. We close ourselves out from this. And when you walk with a shield over your body, besides the size of not being touched, not being involved, not being allowed into the crowd, it's very difficult to live and function. There's, oops, is that one?
It's one of the arrow.
I did. Here.
There. Oh, it's mine.
Oh, now it's two, I think. The point of it is like you're being excluded, the feeling. This has changed a lot and grown a lot at the same time as the population who is obese has grown a lot. And it's the fear of change. If it exists in the fear of the risk exists in everybody. You're not going to like being it because it reminds you of your own risks. So, also weight loss is not the answer to all your problems. Because you have an incredible amount of garbage hanging around you. And sometimes you need to deal with the garbage first, not weight loss. And this is very provoking to say, because everybody thinks that you're going to be there and you're going to lose everything. Because change of size brings change of identity. You walk into a room and you're as in bigger size, and immediately they see something and project a specific thing about this is the way this person is. And then all of a sudden you lose, and you lose very rapidly, like with surgery or something like that. And you're totally lost because you don't know where the culture, where am I? And believe it or not, people who've known you for a long time talks to you with hostility because nobody likes change. So if you all of a sudden lost 50 kilos, they look at you and they walk around your body and then say, ugh, and walk off. Because they don't know who that person is. It's happened to me several times that people don't want to be with me just because of that. So here we are saying that physically we really need to look like this. Watch out, there's a bottle of water down here. Oh, I got a cap on it. So we're all saying that we have to lose weight, and but we forget the adjustment of your being and existing and functioning in society. And we need to have help dealing with that just as much as we need to have help dealing with the physical body. So,
1 minute. She warned us.
Yeah, I know. The life of a person, it exists in a psychological world. And it's happened to me that people principally have come and hit me because they don't know who I am, and I claim to still be Christina. I'm not allowed to say this and that the other in this group because I have changed. And this we project even on small kids. Don't change, be the same. If you have being a kid that is bullied, it's very nice to have somebody who bullies you because you're used to it. It's like changing a whole life situation, changing a whole being and where you are at socially and physically. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was an amazing inside view.
I think Ted is going to give us an outside view, really, an overview of what goes on in opinions. Yes, thank you. Welcome again.
And I only have an hour worth of slides to present. It's 80 short slides, so I'll try and be brief. Hold your questions. We have 30 minutes for questions. So, for disclosures, I would have professional consulting fees with these organizations, and I have personal biases that favor evidence-based interventions, both for prevention and treatment, respect for people living with obesity, and critical thinking about all of the evidence. I would like to acknowledge that this research that I'm going to share with you would not have been possible without grant support to the Obesity Action Coalition from Novo Nordisk, and the collaboration and contributions from these fine people who helped me understand the different cultures in which we were looking at weight bias and stigma. So for background, we have competing narratives that affect ideas about obesity interventions. One is a narrative of moral failure, another is a narrative of addiction, a narrative of a toxic environment, and then a medical narrative. And we looked at these different narratives, and we also looked at some of the pervasive bias that hampers clinical care and obesity-related policy. Some of the essential components of that are blaming people with obesity, a counterproductive tension between prevention and clinical care that gets presented as a false dichotomy. You've got to choose one, you can't have both. I'm sorry, I want both. And a dysfunctional medical dialogue where recently a very distinguished medical ethicist on Medscape, seeing nothing wrong with what he was saying, posed the question, is it acceptable to have obesity? And I thought to myself, wow, would we confront a patient with the question, is it acceptable that you have cancer? No, we're going to deal with it. Key elements of bias against people with obesity includes blame directed at them, assumptions of laziness and poor discipline, and social rejection. And these are all concepts that we've evaluated in different cultures in this ongoing study of bias about people living with obesity and about obesity itself. We measured public attitudes in Australia, Brazil, Canada, Germany, Italy, Mexico, Sweden, the UK, and the US. We assessed agreement with the different narratives of obesity in isolation. We assessed agreement with explicit beliefs about people with obesity. We looked for differences among the countries that we surveyed, and we are monitoring trends in these attitudes and beliefs. We did it online by a method, with a tool called Google Consumer Surveys. You might have been to, for example, news sites or other premium content sites where they say, oh, if you want to use this for free, you need to answer a few quick questions. And those questions then we paid them to insert and ask people. And we only ask people one question at a time. Because when you ask people a lot of questions in a row about a sensitive subject, they start to say, oh, I know where they're going with this. I'll give them what they want to hear. So you get less fatigue and more honest answers if it's just off the top of your head, answer this one question, would you? But as a result, we talked to, we solicited input from more than 90,000 individuals. That sounds like a lot, and it certainly was a lot of data to crunch. Thank goodness for Krista Watts and Diana Thomas at the U.S. Military Academy who helped with the statistical analysis. Each respondent answered, as I mentioned, only one question. We used 5-point Likert scales ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. We asked them about those 4 narratives that I mentioned. We asked them about blame, social acceptance, laziness, and self-discipline of people with obesity. These are all questions that Rebecca Poole was indispensable in terms of helping us figure out what were the right questions to ask. And we got a minimum of 500 respondents for each question in each country and language. In Canada, we asked both French Canadians and English-speaking Canadians and saw some differences there. So just briefly, because I only have an hour, I'm going to give you some of these responses. First thing that really stuck out is that people all across the world seem to favor addiction to junk food as an explanation for why obesity is a problem. You see in Italy that agreement was the greatest. Fully 70% of people agreed with it. But even in the US, where the agreement was the least strong, you had 39% of respondents agreeing with this idea, and only 30% disagreeing, a large contingent of people who were, whatever. They're not as excited about it in the US, but still the public in the US agrees with it more than they disagree with it. And belief in that addiction explanation was especially strong in Brazil, French-speaking Canadians, and in Italy. And these bar graphs come from an odds ratio analysis from a cumulative logit models. And if you ask me about the statistics, we can step aside after my hour is up and I can explain all that to you if we get the statistician who did it on the phone. But what I will say is that these are like the confidence intervals. 1.0 is the level of agreement that you saw from US respondents. They form the baseline. And so, for instance, people from Germany here, let's see, I've got a pointer. Basically, we're on the same page with US respondents when you factor out all of the characteristics of the sample that we had: age, gender, and so forth. But Italy was, Brazilian respondents were more than 3 times as likely to agree with it. Italian respondents, likewise. Mexican respondents are up there, but if you look at how much they agreed with other narratives, it wasn't. Mexican respondents were very, very agreeable. They agreed with all of the narratives that we gave them, and so addiction did not stand out compared to what they said with other respondents, and you'll see how we looked at that. A strong agreement in Sweden, moderately strong agreement in Sweden, but again in Sweden they agreed with some of the other narratives nearly as much. French-speaking Canadians, it might look like they're not agreeing with it all that much, but, and I have 30 more minutes, is that what you said? 20 more minutes, okay. But they agreed with this more than they agreed with anything else. And only in the US, UK and US, and here the baseline is the degree of agreement within each of these countries I'm showing you here for responsibility. You can see that only in the UK and the US did respondents believe in irresponsibility as much as they agreed with other explanations. And irresponsibility is the notion that the only reason obesity is a problem is because those fat people are so irresponsible, and it's disgusting. US and the UK tends to think, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable explanation. All the other countries kind of rejected that. Across all measures, we saw that UK respondents expressed harsh bias, while French-speaking Canadians expressed less bias. And even though I have another 20 minutes, I'm going to give you my conclusions here and say that what we found was that public beliefs related to weight bias differ among these 9 populations. There's a strong belief that addictive junk food causes obesity, and that belief is especially strong in Brazil, Italy, and French-speaking Canada. And we found the harshest beliefs in the UK, and generally speaking, we found less harsh beliefs on average in French-speaking Canadians. If you want more information, you can go to my blog. The link is here, and I also have posted a PDF of these slides at this link here on Conscient Health, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook. And so for the next 30 minutes, I'll take any questions that you have.